in the small, mist-covered towns of Connecticut, where stone walls snake through ancient forests and colonial homes sit like time capsules in the fog, something lingers. This land, one of the oldest corners of America, holds secrets that never truly settled. From the haunted harbors of New London to the whispering woods of Litchfield County, legends have rooted themselves deep into the soil. Stories of spirits, monsters, and cursed souls passed down in hushed tones, around fires and under breath. Today we're bringing 12 of those legends back to life. Each tale is born from truth, an event, a person, a moment in time, but warped by time and fear into something much more terrifying. These are not just stories, they are warnings, echoes, shadows that still move beneath Connecticut's quiet surface, and as we pull back the curtain on each one, you may begin to wonder, are these just tales, or something waiting to be remembered? Let's begin. They say if you take the wrong road through the woods of Shelton, something might follow you home. Small, silent, misshapen, in the shadowy outskirts of Fairfield County, particularly near the dense forests of Trumbull and Monroe, whispers have long carried the tale of the Melonheads, a clan of deformed, reclusive beings said to haunt the winding backroads. The legend begins, as many do in Connecticut, with the eerie remnants of a forgotten institution, the Fairfield County Mental Asylum. According to lore, sometime in the mid-20th century, the asylum was shut down after a scandal too dark for newspapers. The patients, it is said, were left to fend for themselves in the woods. Among them were children, victims of grotesque medical experimentation, their heads swollen and distorted. These children vanished into the wilderness, surviving on roots, secrecy, and possibly something more sinister. Witnesses over the decades have reported sudden glimpses of tiny figures darting between trees. One man in the 1970s swore he saw a pale face with bulbous eyes peering into his car window after it stalled near Lake Mohegan. A woman in the 90s said she was chased by small figures while walking her dog on Velvet Street, better known as Dracula Drive to the locals. Tire tracks and broken branches led police to investigate, but they found only the stillness of the trees and the echo of giggles where no children should have been. Skeptics blame inbreeding, hallucinations, or misidentified animals, but residents speak differently. They talk of a tribe of survivors deeply territorial and no longer human. Some claim they guard the ruins of their old asylum, now buried by forest and memory. Others say they just watch and wait. Today, teens dare each other to drive the backroads at night. Signs are stolen as trophies. Stories get passed at sleepovers, but few are brave enough to walk into the woods alone, especially when the wind carries laughter not quite right for human throats. And if you hear twigs snap behind you, whatever you do, don't turn around. Not all legends live in the past. Some are still watching. They call it the Village of the Damned, but if you look for it on a map, you won't find it. Dudleytown has been erased not just from paper but from memory. Almost tucked deep within the shadowy woods near Cornwall, Connecticut, lies the hushed ruin of Dudleytown, a settlement long abandoned and surrounded by more dread than documentation. The legend begins in the 1740s, when members of the Dudley family, descendants of English nobility, settled in the area. According to folklore, the Dudleys brought more than belongings across the Atlantic. They carried a curse once said to have plagued their lineage since a relative, Edmund Dudley, was executed for treason in the decades that followed. Tragedy began to soak into the soil of Dudleytown. Lightning struck more than once. Families succumbed to madness, one after another. Paranoia took root. People disappeared. Some were found later muttering nonsense, eyes wide with horror at things unseen. Others vanished entirely, leaving food still warm on the table. By the late 1800s, the last residents had fled or died. The forest swallowed what remained, but the darkness never left. Modern visitors to the site, those who trespass through the woods and pass the no trespassing signs, have reported bizarre symptoms: nausea, disorientation, sudden fear. Some speak of hearing whispers in a language they don't recognize. A paranormal team in the early 1990s claimed their equipment failed simultaneously, followed by a shriek from the trees that sent them fleeing. Skeptics attribute the tales to mold, electromagnetic fields, or mass hysteria, but the town's complete abandonment and the secrecy surrounding it feeds the flames of the legend. Even the landowners today refuse to allow visitors, citing dangerous terrain, but locals know it's not the land that's dangerous. Today, the legend of Dudleytown thrives in documentaries, whispered ghost tours, and the occasional midnight dare, but few make the journey twice, because the silence in Dudleytown is thick, heavy, and some believe it's listening. They say you can enter, but not everyone comes back the same. Legend 3. The Ghost Ship of New Haven Harbor. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick across the harbor, sailors say you can see sails gliding over the water, even when no wind blows and no ship is there. In the colonial days of 1647, the merchants of New Haven, eager to stake their place in the booming trade of the New World, commissioned a grand ship, a pride of their fleet, to sail directly to England. Laden with local goods and hopeful ambition, the vessel departed under clear skies, but it was never seen again. No word, no wreckage, only silence and sorrow. That would be the end of most stories, but not this one. Months later, during a still summer evening, as townsfolk gathered near the harbor wall, a strange vision emerged from the sea mist. A full ship appeared, phantom sails swollen with wind that wasn't there, a ghostly hull, gleaming faintly in the dying light. Witnesses claimed it mirrored the lost vessel exactly, and just as silently as it had arrived, the ship drifted across the water and vanished into thin air. What made this more than legend were the testimonies. Clergy, magistrates, dozens of respected citizens wrote detailed accounts of what they saw. The governor himself, Theophilus Eaton, is said to have witnessed it and declared it a sign from God. Some believed it was the spirits of the lost crew, finally returning home. Others whispered darker things, that the ship had become cursed, trapped between worlds, unable to reach any shore. The legend persisted through centuries. Even as New Haven grew into a bustling port, and later a modern city, tales of a glowing ship appearing in the harbor on foggy nights refused to die. Fishermen say they've seen flickering lights just beyond the breakers, and lighthouse keepers have reported phantom sails gliding across the horizon before dissolving into mist. Skeptics blame sea smoke, mirages, or mass delusion, but that doesn't explain the shared details: the shape of the rigging, the arc of the sails, the stillness of the sea around it. Today, the ghost ship of New Haven lives on in local lore. A historical marker mentions the voyage, but the legend that the ship still tries to find its way home through the fog has become something far more lasting. And if you ever find yourself near the harbor when the mist rolls in, look closely, because not every vessel you see is truly there. Legend 4. The Haunting of Seaside Sanatorium. Even the sea can't wash away everything. Some buildings cling to pain like a memory etched into stone, and Seaside Sanatorium is one of them. Along the rocky coastline of Waterford, overlooking the churning waters of Long Island Sound, stands a striking brick structure once hailed as a medical marvel. Seaside Sanatorium, built in the 1930s, was the first facility in the country designed specifically to treat children with tuberculosis using heliotherapy, sunlight and sea air as medicine. It was a place of hope, and yet, something darker grew within its walls. Over the decades, patients died, some from illness, others, whispered locals, from neglect or despair. When TB treatment evolved, the facility shifted purposes, first a geriatric hospital, then a home for the developmentally disabled. Each chapter added its own shadows, each generation its own tragedies. Eventually, the building was abandoned, but not forgotten. Visitors who trespassed in the years that followed tell of echoing laughter in empty halls, beds creaking with unseen weight, and shadows darting past broken windows. One man, a former security guard, claimed to hear the same phrase repeated over and over on his radio. Please open the window. There was no one else on the frequency. Others have spoken of a woman in white wandering the upper floors, or of the unsettling cold that lingers in the children's ward, even in the middle of summer. Paranormal investigators have recorded electronic voice phenomena, childlike whispers, moans, and the sound of something breathing. Skeptics attribute the stories to the building's decay and the power of suggestion, but many who've stepped inside report an overwhelming sense of sadness, of unfinished business clinging to every hallway. In recent years, the site has become the focus of debate. Some want to restore it, others demand its demolition, fearing what might still linger inside. For now, it sits in limbo, its windows dark, its doors locked, but never truly empty. And when the sea breeze carries a chill up the cliffs of Waterford, some say you can still hear faint cough and a child's voice asking, "Is it time to go outside?" Legend 5. The Demon of Guntown Cemetery. There's a stretch of land in Naugatuck where even the grass seems reluctant to grow, and where silence is not a comfort but a warning. Nestled off a narrow road, hidden behind a canopy of gnarled trees, lies Guntown Cemetery, one of the oldest burial grounds in Connecticut. Dating back to the late 1700s, the graveyard is the final resting place of Revolutionary War soldiers, forgotten settlers, and according to many, something far more sinister. The legend begins with strange sounds. Visitors have reported music drifting through the trees, violin or fife, despite no houses nearby. Others hear children laughing in the dark, though no children are ever seen. Some have captured orbs of light darting between headstones, or shadows that don't belong to anything living. But the most disturbing tale is that of a demonic entity said to haunt the cemetery's core. It's described as a black mass shifting, smoke-like, but with weight and presence. One paranormal group claimed their equipment failed simultaneously as a low growl echoed from the woods. A local teenager swore he was chased from the grounds by something invisible, but heavy enough to leave deep impressions in the ground behind him. Photos taken at night reveal odd distortions, figures that appear, then vanish upon closer inspection. A woman once said she saw a figure crouching near a grave, but when she called out, it rose, not stood, and drifted toward her without feet. She didn't wait to see more. Skeptics suggest swamp gas, tricks of light, or wildlife. But regulars know better. They tell of how animals refuse to enter the grounds, how even phone signals die as you step past the stone wall. The air grows still, the wind vanishes, and something, listen. Despite its ominous reputation, Guntown has become a pilgrimage for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. Yet many leave with more than they bargained for: scratches, bruises, dreams that wake them in cold sweat. And some say once you've been marked by the Guntown demon, you never sleep quite the same again, because in a place where the dead are buried, not all that stirs beneath the soil is at rest. Legend 6. The Leatherman of the Connecticut Loop. He never spoke, he never stayed, but wherever he walked, the land remembered, and still does. Between the 1850s and 1880s, a strange figure wandered the trails and roads of Connecticut and New York, always dressed in a handmade suit of leather stitched from old boots and scrap. Townsfolk called him the Leatherman, and he followed a strict 365-mile loop, walking it over and over every 3 to 4 days, never missing a beat, never changing direction. He slept in caves, ate scraps left on porches, and spoke only in grunts or French whispers. No one ever learned his name. No one ever saw him angry. Children would gather at crossroads to watch him pass, their parents standing quietly behind them, food in hand, not out of charity but reverence. For in his silence the Leatherman seemed otherworldly, eternal. As time wore on, stories wrapped around him like the leather he wore. Some claimed he was a penitent monk, walking for sins he never named. Others believed he'd lost his family in a great fire, and was cursed to walk until his soul found peace. A few whispered darker things, that he was a ghost, or something not quite human, bound by a deal long forgotten. Eyewitnesses told of seeing him vanish into caves and hearing murmured prayers in foreign tongues. One farmer swore he saw the Leatherman walk across a frozen river without breaking the ice. A train crew once claimed he appeared on the tracks and disappeared just as quickly without a sound. When he died in 1889 in a cave near Ossining, New York, his belongings were minimal: a prayer book in French, a tin can, and the clothing he'd worn for decades. He was buried in an unmarked grave, later given a headstone, but even that has been moved, reportedly because his grave became too active at night. Today you can hike parts of the Leatherman's Loop, a trail that winds through the same hills he once walked. His caves remain, scattered through towns like Watertown, Middlebury, and Westchester. Offerings are still left: boots, coins, notes, by those who feel his spirit still moves along the path. He never told his story, and maybe that's why it still haunts, because some roads once walked never forget the feet that tread them, and some wanderers never truly stop walking. Legend 7. The Cursed Village of Barahak. They call it the village that whispers, a place where time stopped, but voices still speak. Deep in the woods of Pomfret, Connecticut, lies the overgrown remains of Barahak, a once thriving 18th-century settlement founded by two families, Wilkinsons and Rays, both devout and hard-working. But what began as a peaceful pastoral village soon turned into something strange. Abandoned after just a few generations, Barahak decayed faster than it should have, and from that rot grew a legend. Even in its heyday, the village was said to be unnaturally quiet. The air held an eerie stillness. Livestock refused to cross certain areas of the property. When the last residents left in the mid-1800s, nature reclaimed the land with unnatural speed, but the sounds never left. Visitors throughout the 20th century reported hearing voices, soft murmuring, as if a conversation were happening just beyond the veil of reality. A rusted swing still sways on its own. A cradle, now long gone, was once heard rocking back and forth with the sound of a baby crying in the distance. And through the trees more than one witness has described seeing the ghostly outline of a horse-drawn carriage, wheels turning silently over ground it no longer touches. Paranormal investigators claim Barahak is a psychic echo, a place caught in a spiritual loop where residual energy plays out like a broken record. But others think something darker is at work. Some say a child was buried improperly, or that a member of the founding family dabbled in forbidden rites, cursing the land forever. Skeptics say the stories are exaggerated, fueled by the stillness and isolation of the ruins. Yet even they admit there's something wrong with the air in Barahak. It doesn't move right, it presses in. The site is on private land now, protected from thrill seekers. But those who visited legally or otherwise report the same thing: a crushing silence, followed by whispers, and always when they leave, the sense that someone or something is walking a few paces behind them, just out of sight. Legend 8. The Green Lady of Burlington. They say she walks where the water meets the trees, a shimmer of green mist with sorrow in her step. Along the moss-covered trails of Burlington's Seventh-day Baptist Cemetery, a quiet place now mostly hidden by woods and decay, lingers the legend of the Green Lady, a spirit wrapped not in white, like most, but in a strange and glowing shade of emerald. Her tale, like the mist she walks in, has changed with time, but the grief has always remained. According to the oldest version, the woman was a colonial settler's wife. Her husband went out one stormy night to fetch help for their ailing child and never returned. Some say lost, others say murdered. When she went out to find him, lantern in hand, she vanished into the swamp. Her body was never found, but not long after, people began to see a glowing green figure near the edges of the water, wandering, waiting. The cemetery became a magnet for paranormal activity. Locals reported their headlights failing as they approached the entrance. Photographers captured strange streaks of green light, always near the same gravestones. One man in the 1970s claimed a fog rose from the ground and formed the shape of a woman before reaching toward him. He ran and never returned. Teenagers daring each other to enter have come back shaken, describing soft moans, the scent of wet earth, and a cold hand brushing against theirs in the dark. A former police officer once said his patrol car stalled for no reason at the site, until he whispered "I'm sorry" into the car started immediately. Skeptics suggest swamp gas, natural decay, and human imagination, but that doesn't explain the consistency of the stories or the glow. No creature of nature moves like her. No explanation fits the green light. Today the path to the cemetery is hard to find. Overgrowth guards it like a secret, but still people try, because the green lady hasn't faded. She's just harder to see until you're close enough to feel her breath on your neck. And if you see green mist curling between the trees, don't follow it. She's not looking for company. She's still looking for her husband. Legend 9. Hannah Crenna, the Witch of Monroe. She didn't hide from the rumors. They made her stronger, and long after death, her name still stirs fear in the hills of Monroe. In the 1800s, a widow named Hannah Hovey lived on the outskirts of Monroe, Connecticut, but to her neighbors, she was better known by another name, Hannah Crenna, the Wicked Witch of Monroe. She didn't cower from the title. She embraced it, and that's where her legend begins. Unlike the cackling witches of folklore, Hannah was no recluse. She was sharp-tongued, commanding, and deeply feared by those around her. Chickens would die after someone insulted her. Crops failed when neighbors refused to sell her bread or firewood. One man who laughed at her tripped and broke both legs before reaching the end of her driveway. Coincidence, or something more? Hannah claimed no formal powers, but neither did she deny them. She warned of storms, predicted deaths, and issued chilling threats that often came true. After her husband died mysteriously, some say by falling off a cliff, many believed she'd pushed him or cursed him, but no one ever accused her openly. Fear kept them silent. When Hannah grew old, she made one last demand, that her body be buried at night by torchlight, with no delays. When townsfolk ignored her wish, a sudden snowstorm buried the roads. Horses panicked. Coffins tipped. The funeral had to be postponed. And just as she promised, chaos followed. Even today, her grave in Stepney Cemetery is avoided by many. Some say the ground there feels colder. Others report seeing her standing by the tree line, wrapped in black, eyes shining even in moonlight. The legend holds that if you speak her name near her grave, bad luck will follow. Some leave offerings. Most just leave. Skeptics say she was a clever woman in a superstitious time, but locals know better. Hannah Crenna wasn't just feared. She was respected, in the oldest, darkest sense of the word. Because in New England, witches don't vanish. They settle into the roots, into the land. And sometimes, they wait. Legend 10. The Devil's Hopyard, and the Screaming Falls. When water screams in the woods, something ancient may be listening, or perhaps, something cursed is crying out. In the quiet town of East Haddam, lies a beautiful but eerie expanse of forest, called Devil's Hopyard State Park, a name as curious as the legends it inspired. Most visitors come for Chapman Falls, a cascade of white water thundering over dark rock, but some come looking for the stories, the screams, and the footprints left behind by the devil himself. The origins of the name are murky. Some say hopyard refers to colonial times when hops were grown for brewing, but the devil part that came late. According to legend, the devil himself once danced atop the rocks, furious at a nearby priest who dared banish him from a village. In his rage, he stomped so violently that he left behind deep, perfect holes in the stone. Those holes remain to this day, circular, smooth, and strangely precise, etched into the rock like scars from another world. But the rocks aren't the only thing haunted. Hikers report hearing a woman's scream echoing from the falls, especially near dusk. Some believe it's the spirit of a girl who leapt to her death long ago, after being rejected by a lover. Others say it's not a woman at all, but the voice of something older, something trapped beneath the water, cursed to cry out every night as punishment. Several hikers have reported dizziness or nausea near the pool below the falls, and more than one person has returned with photos showing unexplained mist or glowing orbs. A boy once disappeared in the 1960s for nearly 5 hours, found later in the same spot he'd vanished, confused, silent, and soaking wet. Park rangers caution visitors to stay on marked paths. The terrain is treacherous, they say, but some believe that's just a polite way to say, stay away from what you can't explain. Whether it's geological oddity, trick of sound, or something darker, the falls continue to roar and scream through the woods of East Haddam. And when you stand alone at the water's edge, looking down into those dark pools, you may feel something looking back. Legend 11, The Witch's Dungeon in Bristol. Beneath a quiet Connecticut museum lies something stranger than fiction. A shrine to terror, built from legend, obsession, and perhaps something more. In the town of Bristol, tucked behind trees and surrounded by suburban calm, stands one of the most curious and eeriest attractions in New England. The Witch's Dungeon Classic Movie Museum. At first glance it seems simple, a tribute to vintage horror films and the monsters that terrified generations. But locals speak of it with a different kind of reverence and unease. Because the line between tribute and portal, between homage and haunting, grows thin within its walls. The museum was founded in the 1960s by Cortlandt Hull, the great-nephew of Henry Hull, who famously portrayed the Werewolf of London. Cortlandt began building the museum as a child, constructing wax figures, sculpting lifelike creatures, and collecting artifacts from horror history. But from the beginning, strange things surrounded the place. Visitors often reported lights flickering as they approached the dungeon. Some claimed the figures moved slightly when no one was looking. A woman fainted once in front of the Dracula exhibit, later saying she felt something lean in close and whisper in a voice older than death. Even Hull himself has acknowledged unexplained phenomena: cold spots, footsteps when the building is empty, and the sensation of being watched by more than just mannequins. The dungeon's original home was in the family basement, where the stone walls and low ceilings created a natural stage for nightmares. Over time, the museum expanded, but the aura remained. Some guests have sworn that after visiting the dungeon, they experienced dreams of the figures coming to life or awoke with claw marks, bruises, and the sound of an old projector playing in their ears. Skeptics argue it's simply a masterfully eerie setting, but others believe the dungeon channels something deeper, the collective fear that horror has always fed on, that by honoring the monsters of cinema, the museum accidentally cracked a door between what we imagine and what waits just beyond. Today, the Witch's Dungeon is open to the public, complete with a new facility and restored displays. But for those who step inside, the air is thick, the shadows long, and the monsters, some say they're not just whack. Because in Bristol the real fear isn't in the films, it's in what they might have awakened. Legend 12, The Lady in White of Union Cemetery. They say she glows, not with warmth, but with a cold light that freezes the heart before the eyes can even adjust. In the old town of Easton, Connecticut, along the winding, weather-worn path of Route 59, sits Union Cemetery, a place not just of rest but of national notoriety. Often called one of the most haunted cemeteries in America, its legend centers on a singular ghostly figure, the Lady in White. Her story has no confirmed beginning, only sightings. She appears suddenly without warning in the dead of night, draped in a flowing white gown that seems to shimmer like mist under moonlight. Witnesses say she floats above the ground, sometimes weeping, sometimes staring with blank, brilliant eyes. Her presence brings silence and dread. One of the earliest accounts came from a police officer in the 1990s, who claimed his cruiser's headlights lit up a woman standing in the middle of the road by the cemetery. When he braked, she vanished, only for a handprint to appear on the hood of his still idling car. Since then, drivers have reported swerving to avoid a pale figure, only to find nothing there, except a drop in temperature and the hair on their arms standing straight up. Paranormal legends exploded around the cemetery when famed investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren named it one of the most active haunted sites they ever studied. They even claimed to have video footage of the lady in white, though it was never publicly released. According to Lorraine, the spirit carried the grief of a tragic death, possibly a murdered bride, or a woman abandoned on her wedding day. Skeptics argue that headlights on gravestones or imagination triggered by the cemetery's fame explain the sighting, but too many stories align: the sudden appearance, the white dress, the unshakable sorrow. Even during the day, people report the feeling of being watched. Tread too close to her grave, and you might hear footsteps in the grass behind you, always just far enough not to see. Locals know the legend well. Some avoid the cemetery altogether. Others leave flowers, just in case. But one warning is universal: if you see her, do not approach, do not speak. Because if grief can linger long enough, sometimes it finds a body again.